Welcome back to another episode on the More Than Social podcast. This is a very special episode. Well, actually, the next 4 episodes are pretty special, and honestly, I am pretty excited. A few months ago, I was a guest on my friend's podcast as it relates to podcasting to do an exclusive series with her audience. So what I did in 4 episodes, I broke down everything from A to Z on what podcasters need to know when using paid ads to grow their audience. So Simona, the podcast host and my podcast producer, she's actually been on the More Than Social podcast before, so you will already know her. But if you haven't listened to episode number 16 on how to launch and grow a podcast, I highly recommend listening to that one before you dive into this 4-part series. In this series, I go deep into what you need to know about setting your business up for paid ads and all the ad fundamentals. And then I get into some more advanced strategies to generate leads through your podcast. So like I said, this is being released in 4 different episodes over the next 4 weeks for you guys. So make sure that you subscribe to my podcast so you are notified when the next part is live. Anyways, let's jump right into the series. I hope you like it. This one's for you.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome to the As It Relates to Podcasting podcast. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hey, Simona. Thanks so much for having me. It's reversed this time. You were on my podcast and now on yours.
I know. Honestly, I love it so much. And when I was thinking about this series and what I felt like everyone needed to know when it comes to advertising for their podcast, obviously you are the first person that I thought of because, first of all, I value you so much. Second of all, you are an absolute genius when it comes to ads. And third of all, we've been testing them on your podcast as well, which is the More Than Social podcast. Let's do a little plug in there for you. I want to get into this video. It's going to be all about the fundamentals of ads. And I would love to just start off, if you want to just take the floor, what do we need to have prepared in order to start running ads for our podcasts?
Amazing. So honestly, there's a few things that you need to have prepared. I'm going to keep it simplified right now, and we'll get kind of advanced as we get going through these series. But obviously, first thing, you need to have your podcast, whether that is you just getting started with your podcast or it's just about to launch, that's totally okay. Or whether it's a seasoned podcast and this is something that you want to jump on now to really just expedite it. But really what you need to do to run advertising. And when I say advertising, I'm talking about Facebook and Instagram advertising. You need to have actually the back end of your Facebook set up. So what I mean by that, the back end of Facebook is where people should be running ads. And I say should be running ads because a lot of people will just press that boost button or that sponsor button that they see on Instagram or Facebook. We don't want to do that. But regardless, you need to have the back end of Facebook set up. And this is something called a Facebook Business Manager or Meta Business Manager since they changed the name. You also need to make sure that you have 2 accounts set up. So you want to have a Facebook page set up. Some people will say, well, why do I want a Facebook page? My audience isn't on there. That's a whole other topic I'll get into for a second. But you want to make sure you have a Facebook page set up and an Instagram page set up. Now, I'm not just talking a Facebook profile. There's a difference between a Facebook profile and a Facebook business page, okay? A Facebook profile is where you have your friends and your family requesting to be your friend. A Facebook business page is a standalone page. It does act like a profile on Facebook, but it's a standalone page that is designed specifically for your business and talking to your dream client. Okay. You also want to have your Instagram business page set up. So Instagram, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Instagram. Instagram is important to have, but you need to make sure that that is set up as a creator or a business account, not a personal account.
So you can have either or. It could be a creator account or it could be a business account. It doesn't matter, just as long as it's not that personal account.
Exactly. As long as it's public and it's open and people can see it, that's what you need to have. You don't need to have an Instagram account in order to run Facebook ads or Instagram ads, but you need to have a Facebook business page.
Okay.
But it really comes down to who you're talking to at that point. Let's just go into your dream client. So you need to know who you're talking to determine where they're hanging out online. So let's just say my audience, they are typically on Instagram. However, I still have a Facebook business page. Why? One, I do have some people who are on Facebook still. People are in Facebook groups, whatever. I can generate leads through Facebook. But my audience, they live on Instagram. If I don't have a Facebook business page, I'm not going to run as effective ads. So you want to have those 2 set up. Facebook business page and your Instagram business page.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. This is actually really, really valuable information right now, because I think that a lot of people don't realize that, and I know a lot of new podcasters especially don't realize that you actually have to have both of those accounts like hooked up, even if you're, this is a side tangent, but even if you're going to schedule stuff like social media, like you need to have those two accounts set up. So it's interesting though that we have to do it from the back end and have it all be done like in Meta Business, as opposed to what I know people are thinking, and we are going to touch on this in a future video about just boosting ads. But anyways, I digress, and I would love for you to continue on, but I just wanted to throw that little piece in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the back end of your Facebook. So like I said, so Facebook, why I say Facebook, the back end of Facebook is you're logging in to Facebook when you're setting up the whole back end process for your business. So you log into facebook.com, your personal account is what you log into. You build your page, your business page on that personal account, but it shows up as different profiles. So you log into your personal Facebook account, and then you go to business.facebook.com. As soon as you go to business.facebook.com, it will take you to their back end of where they manage the businesses. Okay. That's where you connect your Instagram account. So you mentioned scheduling posts. You can schedule posts on the back end of your Meta account or Facebook account on both your Facebook and Instagram business pages. Okay. When it comes to actually setting it up though, like I said, you want to make sure that both of them are public. You want to make sure that you have both of them, and you want to make sure that you are setting up your business account under business.facebook.com. It may sound like overwhelming right now, but when you go to Facebook or business.facebook.com, it literally walks you through every single step of what you need to do. It'll ask you, what is your business name? Put in your business name. If you don't have a corporation, that's totally okay. Use your name as the business name if you're a sole proprietor or if you're just getting started. So you set up business.facebook.com. That's the first thing that you really, really need, besides obviously your podcast. The next thing that you need to make sure that you have is understanding who you're talking to. Now, if they're having a podcast, if they're working with you specifically, I know they have a sense of who they're talking to, but it goes further than just understanding who are you talking to and how are you trying to help them on your podcast? What are you providing value with on your podcast? It really comes down to where are they hanging out online and how can you actually connect with them. So if I do my dream client, for example, her name is Brittany. She is 35 years old. She is a mortgage agent, and she's been a mortgage agent for 3 years. She is using social media for her business. She's using both Facebook and Instagram, but she doesn't necessarily know what she's doing on social media. She's just that person just trying to post, trying to do reels. She's trying to figure it out. Outside of social media or her business, she is into fitness, she's into hiking, she's into traveling. So I'm not going to get too in depth with it, but I can start to picture Brittany, of me understanding who that dream client is. Now, when it comes to social media, when it comes to advertising, the more that you understand who you're talking to, the more you can relate to them. So understanding who you're talking to is probably one of the most important things you can do when it comes to advertising. Because how I like to run advertising is really speaking to people's pain points, and it's having that emotional connection with them. It's not having an advertising saying, hey, I have the best podcast in the world, check it out. It's, hey, if you're looking to scale your business using social media, but you actually hate social media and you want to get off of social media, my podcast is for you.
I love that.
What I did is I pulled out their pain point. I know that they hate social media. And I know that they're trying to use it to grow their business, though. I'm not saying I have the #1 podcast is going to help you achieve this. It's talking to them. So if you don't know your dream client's pain points, if you don't know what triggers them, if you don't know what keeps them up at night, if you don't know where they're hanging out on social media, you're not going to have as effective of social media posts or ads. Regardless.
That makes so much sense. And I think too, that's just such a big piece in general, but especially when it comes to running ads, because, and I know I've done this before in the past, especially with those dreaded boosted posts, and we're going to dive into that again on a future episode, but I know that I've run ads and there's been like no conversion at all, because at the time I didn't know who I was talking to, right? And at the time I had no idea what those specific pain points were. And ultimately, how can you run an ad to something if you don't know what that person is experiencing, what they're going through, why they're struggling, and all of those different things. And so I think like when it comes to a podcast, your podcast is in response to something in particular, right? Even if it's an entertainment podcast, like even if it's a comedy podcast or whatever type of podcast it is, it's still in response to something and it fulfills a need for someone. And knowing exactly what that is and dialing in really clearly on who your niche is, who your market is, and who you're serving allows your podcast to have a bigger reach in the online space. And ultimately you're hitting those different people. And it's kind of twofold though, because you need all that exact same information when you're setting up who you're targeting, right? Who the demographics are, who, like the location that they're in, what are their interests, what all of those different things, right? Okay, let's shift a little bit into the graphics and like video component of running ads. So one big thing that I wanted to touch on as well is clearly, social media has had this massive shift towards video content in general. Traditionally, when you think about ads though, you're running kind of like a still image ad most of the time, or you'll run like, an ad to a download or something like that. But typically it's not video content. So this is like a little bit twofold. So the first one is like, how do you decide and know what kind of graphics you want, right? And then secondly, how do you know when to add in that different media, right? When is the right time to add in video? Is there a right time? Should you be pulling a clip out of your podcast and using that as an ad? Or should you be like recording something else, something separate that you use as an ad?
So
it's loaded.
Twofold question from you. It's loaded. So let's take it a step back. So understanding the different graphics and videos that you can be using. There are so many different types of ads that you can run online. It really comes down to testing, and over the next few episodes that we do here, you're going to hear me say this a lot, and it's probably going to get annoying, but you need to test. And the reason why I say that is I could place a video ad on my account and I could place a still image ad on your account. They're going to get totally different results based on who we are talking to. So again, it always comes back to who we are talking to. But what I typically do, just to start off from scratch, let's say, I always run 3 different types of ads. I'll start off with a video ad. I'll have a still image ad that has a short copy, and then I'll have a still image ad that has a long copy. So when I'm running from the very start of advertising, I'm testing those 3 different things. What that's going to tell me is, does my audience like long form copy? Does it like short form copy? Or does it like video over images?
What I think is super key there too, and we are going to dive into this in our next episode together. We are going to talk about all of the different types of ads specifically, but I think it's really important for people to understand that regardless of, the type of ad that you're creating, or not regardless, but, you need to know the type of ad that you're creating in order to understand which graphics that you want to create, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. You need to understand it, but you also need to, and it's another mistake that people make when they're using still images, they're coming across very advertising. So that's the thing. It's like, we are so conditioned based on just how we grew up to think when we're starting to advertise that we have to be an advertiser. You don't want to be an advertiser. So you're not creating a billboard that is saying, hey, I had the #1 podcast to help you do this. You're coming across as a person, and that's what's going to make you stand out. So instead of having a video of you necessarily promoting how amazing your podcast is, because I'm sure it is great, you're coming across and you could be talking about why you started your podcast in the first place. That is going to have a better impact than saying, hey, listen to my podcast, is the best thing that you're ever going to hear.
I love that.
But we're conditioned that way. Like, I always like to use Coca-Cola for an example. If you can think of their commercials, okay? A Coca-Cola commercial that, I don't know why this one just popped in my head, but it is this younger boy, and he's going on a very first date. He has his flowers, and he gets into his car, and he walks up to the door. He's super nervous. He knocks on the door, and the dad answers. The girl comes down. You can see that he's sweating a bit. He's just super uncomfortable. Then they get into the car, and they're driving off to the restaurant. As soon as they get to the restaurant, he sits down, orders a Coca-Cola, opens a Coca-Cola, takes a drink, and he's instantly calm. That has nothing to do with, hey, buy my Coca-Cola, it has this, it's going to do whatever for you.
Exactly.
You're building that emotional connection. So same thing with your advertising. When you're getting ready, whether it's a video, whether it's an image of you with your podcast equipment, on your podcast, just you just standing there with a laptop, doesn't matter. A picture of you is going to come across a lot better than an advertisement that says #1 podcast in wherever. Listen to it now.
That is so true. It's really about building that human connection. And I think too, because we're so bombarded with so many ads and with so much content all the time, that it's like, if it doesn't make an impact to you, if it comes off as self-serving, and if it comes off as just like, look at me, I'm amazing, I did this, people aren't really going to resonate with that. Exactly like you're saying. People want to feel heard and understood and supported and loved and cared for in all sense of the word, right? But at the same time, if you want to have an effective ad campaign and write effective copy and have ads, graphics that are pulling people in, you really do have to build that emotional connection. And so I love that you highlight that. And I love that you make that a priority for your ad campaigns and the work that you do for your clients, and also as we're running ads for your podcast as well. I think that's so important and that's so key. And I want to quickly touch on, before we wrap up this video here today, I want to touch on ad budget expectations, because I think a lot of the times we may probably think that it's going to either cost us way more than it does, or it will cost us way less than it does. And maybe if you're doing like $2 a day, that might not actually bring you any traffic at all. I'd love your thoughts.
Yes. So when we get into the episode where we're talking strictly about the types of ads that you should be running, this will make a lot more sense. But just to give you a high level expectation, going back 7 years ago, I would say $5 a day is going to generate a lot of leads, a lot of interest for your business. Now, I don't want to get too far into it, but there's the types of ads that we can't run with our podcast because of tracking ability. So that $5 a day can work for your podcast ads. If we're talking about lead generation, I would say no, we got to talk about $20 a day. So to your point of $2, you don't want to spend $2. Right. $5 a day is the minimum that I would recommend for the type of ads that you can run for your podcast. As of right now, things are going to be evolving with the podcast world. They're going to have better ads and tracking ability. I can already start to see it, but that $5 a day is going to be sufficient enough to get you enough traffic from a click perspective, meaning you're driving traffic to the actual podcast. That's going to, basically you have to spend to play, essentially, in the online world. So bare minimum, $5 a day, $10 a day would be like that perfect sweet spot for you. So if you can budget for $300 a month to get more traffic to your podcast, and then you can start monetizing it once it's growing and growing, then that's going to be beneficial.
Oh, I think that's so good and that's so key. And so before we wrap up here today, Lisa, I am so curious if there's anything else you think that we may have missed that our audience needs to listen to and to hear right now when it comes to the fundamentals of paid ads as it relates to podcasting.
Really just making sure that you know who you're talking to. That is the biggest thing. If you don't know who you're talking to, you're not going to be able to have as effective ads for your podcast. Making sure that you have both your Facebook and Instagram set up. One other thing I can say to that is if you are mainly using Instagram, you can automatically post it on Facebook, the exact same content. It's not going to do too much in terms of engagement and all that, but at least you're being active on both platforms. So when you're running ads, if people are landing it on Facebook, they're at least seeing content. Even though your audience is living mostly on Instagram, it's still beneficial. So having those two set up, and then really just coming down to not overthinking being an advertiser. Don't be an advertiser, be you. Just as you show up on your podcast, people want to know that authentic self with you. Exact same thing with ads.
I love that. That's such great advice. That's such a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation. Thanks so much, Lisa, for joining me for this one. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Real quick, before you go, thank you so much for jumping in and listening to part 1 of this podcast series with Simona. If you have any questions while going through the series, feel free to reach out on social media at any time. This week, we talked a lot about the foundational aspects of getting prepped for running ads. Next week in part 2, I'm actually going to cover the structure of an ad and the different types of ads that you can run for your podcast. So I will see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.